And to speak about 𝗀𝗲, we have to speak about who came before 𝗀𝗲, because 𝗀𝗲 is like regal thread of DNA. It goes all the way back to the beginning. So, and the beginning is the Oduduwa Baba Ifa. So to be able to speak about 𝗀𝗲, we have to speak about a gentleman named Oduduwa. So Oduduwa, not that this video is about Oduduwa, but we're going to have to get into a little bit of the origin myth, because 𝗀𝗲's like pedigree goes all the way back to creation. So Oduduwa, right? When you look at the creation myth within 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, there's versions where it was 𝗿𝗶𝗸𝗏 who came down from heaven on the chain. And there's other versions where it was Oduduwa, right? This immaculate story that speaks of when, Oduduwa descended, upon earth. There's versions in the Oduduwa Baba Ifa where he actually descended upon the king palm, or the palm tree, which was his first home. Neither here nor there. They say that once he arrived and earth was created and human beings and all these different things, he himself started procreating. So there's a couple different versions on that. So forgive me. If it's frustrating for the viewer, I mean, as a scholar, it'll drive you insane until you let go of the desire to be correct. So there's one version where he had one son, where the son's name was 𝗃𝗵𝗵, which means one was born, right? Then there's another version where he had 7 sons. And then there's another version where he had 16 sons. Oh. And that those 16 sons became the 16 kings of Yoruba land under the supreme rulership of Ife, right? Being that Oduduwa was the first Oni of Ife, or the first Onife. The word Oni means crocodile. So he's the crocodile Ife, or the central ancestor. But there's also another version where it speaks of his first son being a gentleman named Oramiyang. Now, why is all of this really key? Well, when you go to various Odus, principally mine, 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗏, it speaks of Oduduwa's life story as well, where the traditional celestial creation myth of Oduduwa being the supreme ruler of Ife, which is seen as the cradle of civilization and the first establishment. It's known as Ile-Ife, which means the house of love, because it's where people started loving each other. And from that, society and civilization actually descended. I remember when I was actually studying Yoruba with my teacher, 𝗷𝗶𝗍, I remember asking her what the word abure meant, because in Cuba we say abure. But the Yoruba word for brother is aburo, which really means descendant of my father. So I remember when I told her that, she said, that's how Ife is referred to. It's known as Ife Abure, which means we have enough to share. So it means the house of love where we share. So it's a place where people would go to be able to find that support and where everyone emanated from. So not to get too lost in this spider web of creation, you have that myth where Oduduwa descended and was king on earth, and everything descended from there, and all the lineages descended from him. So we have that one, right, which is celestial history. Then there is another version where it speaks of Oduduwa actually being from the city of Benin, or Bini, within Yoruba land. Now, this is a hotly debated topic, Phil, where, it puts to the closed-minded person each version's version in critique, right, or under scrutiny, where, the closed-minded person might look and be like, well, one trumps the other. When in reality, it is a reiteration when it comes to 𝗀𝗲, because there's a version where Oduduwa was actually one of the lost princes known as 𝗃𝗏𝗿𝗏 from Benin City, also known as Bini, right? And that he traveled from his natal land due to a scandal that had occurred with his father, Owodo, who was an Ogiso, or a sky king over there, is known as the Ogiso dynasty. And when you actually look into the history of Benin, it's a pretty incredible place. I mean, it was where bronze casting was very developed and innovated, to the point where some of those bronzes, as they're known, are being returned, I believe, from Cambridge to Africa after they were, stolen. And then you also have the Great Benin Wall, which they say was comparable to that of the Great Wall of China, depending on how you measure it. So they say that he was originally one of the lost princes of this land, and he was actually excommunicated from it in a very very like ugly way, where he was accused of things, where, you know, he was seen as either the legitimate or illegitimate son of the last Sky King, Oduduwa. And then there was another version that he entered into conflict with one of the other wives of his father, and she wanted, you know, their child, if they were able to create one, to be the next crown holder. But, you know, the last heir was actually 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃. So because of it, he was excommunicated from his land, and there was a curse placed on it for him, where they say there was this famous sacrifice that occurred where a rat was given to the land and said, "You'll never cross this line again." So he left and he started heading west, right? And there's versions in the same Odu of Baba Ifa that say that on this trek, now mind you, one thing is celestial history, another thing is anthropological history, and then we also have Ifa history. Like, this is actually scripture within the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲 tradition. So it says that when he was coming from the east, which is where Benin city lies, towards Ife, which was further west, you know, he started having revelations and dreams of crowning processes and things he had seen, things he had not seen. And when he arrived in Yoruba land, a divination had been performed, presumably the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍, 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲. It's also in the 𝘃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗍, where it speaks of the 𝘃𝗍 position, etc., where when this gentleman arrived, Ifa told them to induct him as their king, right? Now, this is, once again, hotly debatable, or debated or polemic, but they say that one of the historical reasons why they would have done this is because, being that he was somebody from the outside that didn't have all of the bias and political ties as some of the infighters or infighting that was occurring there, is why they elected him, so they could have a completely neutral person who was very innovative and had great ideas and divine providence. Now, another point that I'm going to make, which is a point that is actually recognized within Shango's mythology, is that he was viewed as the reincarnation of Odudua on earth, and that's why he was ultimately inducted as the Onife, right, or king of Ife, which is the same thing that happened with Shango when we get into the story of 𝗵𝗸𝗃, because 𝗵𝗸𝗃 was not the original Shango. He was somebody that was recognized as having that spirituality of Shango so prevalent within him, and all this divine providence of his birth, being that he was born on Ojo Jakuta Rajaka, where you know, he had all these qualities and traits where they said this is Shango once more. So the same thing could have happened with 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃 being Odudua, right? But why does all of this matter per se? The reason being is because when Odudua arrives in Ife, whether you look at it from a celestial standpoint or an anthropological standpoint, because the people of Benin, you know, which was ancestrally known as 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃, they only have one version of this story, right? When with 𝗃𝗶𝗱𝗲𝗃, where when you look at, you know, spiritual, ancestral, you know, literature or divine creation myth, there's multiple versions of what happened there, where these people only have one historical account, which hasn't been disproven either. And once again, I just want to state for everybody watching, I have no bias towards any of these, to be frank with you, because I think they're both beautiful and enriching, and I think it's meant to be a point of commonality and unity rather than, you know, debate, which we're never going to know because no one was ever there. But neither here nor there.